The bell of St. Aldwyn's struck 11, and Marigold Vesper Hollyfield, until this morning the Duchess of Ravensmore, sat very still on a bench outside the solicitor's office and watched the rain begin. She had not been permitted to bring an umbrella. She had not been permitted to bring much of anything. The trunk at her feet contained 3 day dresses, 2 nightgowns, the small wooden box of her mother's letters, and a single locket holding miniatures of her daughters, Theodosia, aged 6, and Honeysuckle, aged 4. The Duke had been quite specific about what she could keep. Everything else, he had said, belonged to the title, and the title would soon belong to another. The rain came harder. She did not move to find shelter. She had been told to wait on this bench until her brother's carriage arrived, and she had learned over a long, careful morning not to deviate from instructions, because deviation invited cruelty, and cruelty was a wound she could no longer afford. The signed document sat folded against her ribs. Deed of separation. The words she had signed without weeping, because weeping would have given Lord Ravensmore satisfaction. The said Marigold Vesper Hollyfield agrees to relinquish all rights of residence, all marital privileges, and all claims of guardianship over the issue of the said marriage, namely the Lady Theodosia and the Lady Honeysuckle, both being female children and therefore not heirs to the Ravensmore title, but remaining the property of the Duke as their lawful father. The property of the Duke. Her daughters. Theodosia, who had her father's eyes and her mother's stubbornness, and who had cried so hard this morning that the nurse had been forced to carry her from the room. Honeysuckle, who had not understood, who had only kept asking why Mama was wearing her traveling cloak indoors, and would Mama be home for tea? And please, Mama, please. Marigold pressed her gloved fist against her mouth very hard. She did not weep. There were eyes everywhere in this part of London. There were always eyes. A man walked past her bench in the rain, and then stopped, and then walked back. "Madam," he said. She did not look up. She had learned not to look up at men who addressed her on the street. "Madam, forgive me. You are sitting in a quite extraordinary amount of rain." It was the voice that made her look up against her better judgment. Not because it was beautiful, though it was in a low and slightly roughened way, but because it was kind. There had been so little kindness directed at her by anyone for so many months, that the sound of it landed in her chest like a struck bell. He stood perhaps 4 paces from the bench, holding a black umbrella. Tall, with the broad, steady frame of a man who had worked outdoors in some season of his life. Brown hair, dark with rain at the temples. Gray eyes the color of estuary water. He was not a gentleman of fashion. He might not be a gentleman at all, by the strict reckoning of her former world. "I am quite well," she said, and was surprised by how steady the words came out. "You are quite drenched," he answered, and stepped closer, and held the umbrella over her without asking her permission. "Is someone collecting you?" "My brother." "Soon?" "How long have you been here?" The bell had been striking 9 when she had first sat down. She did not say that. She said, "Not long." He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the strange sense that he saw more than she had said. Then he sat down beside her, not close, but close enough to keep the umbrella over them both, and he did not speak. He did not demand her name. He did not ask why she was sitting alone outside a solicitor's office with a single trunk in the rain. He simply held the umbrella and waited with her, as if waiting were a thing one might do for a stranger, as if her grief were a kind of weather he had decided to share. It was this that broke her. She wept the way a woman weeps when she has spent 7 years learning not to. The sound of it was small. Her shoulders shook once, twice, and then she was very still again, and the tears moved down her face without permission, and she was so tired, so impossibly tired, that when her body began to list sideways from sheer exhaustion, she did not catch herself in time. Her temple came to rest against his shoulder. She felt him go absolutely still. Not stiff, not the way Ravensmore went stiff, with that cold withdrawal that meant punishment was coming, but careful, the way a man goes still when a wild bird lands on his hand and he does not wish to frighten it. She smelled wet wool and pipe tobacco and something faintly green, like crushed bay leaves. She knew, with the small, clear part of her mind that had not yet drowned, that she ought to lift her head. A duchess did not weep on the shoulder of a strange man in a public street. A divorced woman certainly did not. She did not lift her head. She did not lift it because she could not. Let them see. Let the eyes of London see. There was nothing left for them to take. A carriage rounded the corner, wheels in water, the slow clop of a tired horse. "Mari," her brother's voice called from the carriage window, sharp with alarm. "Marigold. What in God's name? Who is that man?" She lifted her head then. The world wheeled. The umbrella tilted. She saw her brother Crispin's face, white with fury, and behind him, in the dim of the cab, another face she had not expected. Older, austere, hawk-eyed beneath a black bonnet. And she understood, with a slow, cold descent of the stomach, that her brother had not come alone. The stranger rose to his feet without haste. He folded the umbrella, turned, and gave her brother a small, measured bow, the bow of a man who knew exactly how much courtesy he owed and was offering not a hair more. "Sir," he said, "I beg your pardon for intruding. The lady was unwell. I waited with her until you came." "And you are?" The stranger glanced down at Marigold. There was something in his face she could not read, some private weighing, some decision being made behind those gray eyes. "A friend of the family she is about to enter," he said quietly, "though she does not know it yet." And he set the folded umbrella on the bench beside her and tipped his hat and walked away into the rain. Crispin helped her into the carriage with the rigid courtesy of a man who feared that a single wrong word might shatter the woman beside him. The older woman in the dim of the cab did not move to help. She watched. "Marigold," Crispin said, "this is—" "Sit down, Mr. Hollyfield." The older woman's voice was low and dry, like a page turning. "Your sister is wet through. If we delay another moment, she will catch a chill. And I have not come from Wiltshire in 2 days of bad roads to nurse a corpse." The carriage lurched into motion. "My dear," the woman said, "you are not to be alarmed. I am Lady Aurelia Quennell. I am an old friend of your late mother's, though you will not recall me. Your brother wrote to me a week ago, when matters at Ravensmore became clearer." Marigold managed, "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. I have not been kind. I have been useful, which is a different thing. Crispin, where are we going?" "To Lady Aurelia's house in Bryanston Square, until other arrangements, my dear," Lady Aurelia said. "Your brother's house has 3 rooms and a leaking roof, and the rent is 3 months in arrears. He cannot keep you. I do not say this to wound him. He and I have spoken plainly, and he has agreed." Marigold turned and looked at her brother. Crispin had gone the color of old paper. "Mari, I am sorry. I tried. It does not matter. What arrangements, Lady Aurelia?" "You will live with me for the remainder of the season. You will be presented as my companion, a distant cousin in reduced circumstances. The story will be that your husband died of a fever last spring in the country, and that you have been in deep mourning. No one in town has seen you in 7 years. Your face is not known. My name is Hollyfield. Your name was Hollyfield. For the next 4 months, it will be Mrs. Marigold Vesper, widow of the Vespers of Northumberland, a family which is conveniently extinct in the male line, and which will not contradict us." The carriage struck a hole in the road. Marigold felt the deed against her ribs like a brand. "Why, she said. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. My mother has been dead 19 years. Lady Aurelia smiled, very slightly. It was the smile of a woman who had survived a great many things, and found most of them tedious. Because the Duke of Ravensmore is about to announce his engagement to my goddaughter." Marigold did not breathe. Lady Sabienne Marchcourt, 19 years old. Pretty. Biddable. The only child of an earl with 3 failing estates, and a fondness for the card table. The wedding is set for Michaelmas, 6 weeks hence. He is in such haste, my dear, that I rather think he signed your separation this morning with the inkpot of his next betrothal already open on the desk. 6 weeks. Marigold had been put aside 6 weeks before her replacement. "He cannot," she began, and stopped, because of course he could. "He can. He has. The law is on his side. The church will be on his side. Society will shrug and say a duke must have his heir. Unless a certain widow, Mrs. Vesper of Northumberland, appears in London this autumn. Quiet. Mourning. Beautiful when she chooses to be. Seen at the right concerts, the right suppers, the right 2 or 3 balls. Spoken of. Wondered at. And on her arm, a man who is something the Duke of Ravensmore cannot abide. A man richer than he is, and beholden to no one." "Aurelia," Crispin said weakly. "Be quiet, Crispin. Sabienne is my godchild, and I do not propose to watch the Duke break her as he broke you. The only thing that will make Adrian Hollyfield withdraw an offer, my dear, is the public spectacle of his discarded wife being courted, admired, and chosen by a better man before his very eyes." The carriage was silent except for the rain. "My daughters," Marigold said. "Ah, yes. The deed gave you no right of access. It did not, however, forbid it. A loophole, not generous, but real, so long as you do not present yourself at Ravensmore House and demand entry. The Duke has no legal cause to bar correspondence, gifts, or, at the discretion of the children's nurse, who I understand was your own nurse, and is loyal to you. Occasional private visits. If the Duke remains in his current temper, those visits will be impossible. If the Duke is humiliated into withdrawing his engagement, then a great many things which are presently impossible become, shall we say, negotiable. You are saying that the only way to see my children is to ruin him. I am saying that the only way to see them with any dignity, child, is to make him need something from you." Marigold closed her eyes. She saw Theodosia's small, furious face. She saw Honeysuckle's hands held up to be lifted. She saw the Duke at the head of the long table at Ravensmore 2 months ago, telling her with perfect courtesy over the soup that he had been advised by his physician that the fault was almost certainly hers. She opened her eyes. The man on the bench, with the umbrella. Lady Aurelia's eyebrows rose, very slightly. "Yes?" "He said he was a friend of the family I am about to enter. He said I did not know it yet." For the first time, Lady Aurelia looked surprised, and, beneath the surprise, very faintly amused. "Did he indeed? How very forward of him. You know him. His name is Caspian Wren Thornley. He owns 4 shipping firms, 2 banking houses, a controlling interest in the Liverpool to Manchester Railway, and a house in Berkeley Square that he scarcely sleeps in. He is 34 years old, unmarried, untitled, and reputed to be the most unimpressible man in England. He is also the man I had intended to introduce to you next week." Marigold stared at her. "You arranged for him to be on that street." "I told him on Tuesday that a woman who deserved better than she had received would be leaving a certain solicitor's office at a certain hour. I did not tell him to give her his umbrella. I did not tell him to sit with her in the rain. That, my dear, was entirely his own initiative, and it tells me a great deal more about him than 3 months of dinner parties would have done." The carriage slowed. Through the rain-blurred window, Marigold saw the dignified white front of a tall house in a quiet square. Bryanston Square, welcome, Mrs. Vesper, to the rest of your life. The fire had been lit in the small green sitting room. Someone had brought hot water and dry stockings, and a wool shawl that smelled faintly of cedar wood. Marigold had been left alone for what felt like a long time, and had probably been 20 minutes. Long enough for the trembling in her hands to stop. She was sitting in a wing chair by the fire when Lady Aurelia returned, and she had used the interval to think. She had thought more clearly in those 20 minutes than she had thought in 7 years. Marriage to Ravensmore had taught her to keep her thoughts very small and much hidden. She had grown so accustomed to the smallness that she had almost forgotten she was capable of any other size. "Mr. Thornley has called," Lady Aurelia said, closing the door. "He is in the front drawing room. I told him you were not yet receiving. He said he would wait. He is not, you understand. Behaved as I expected him to behave. Caspian Thornley does not call on women, my dear. Women call on him and are turned away by his secretary. He is the great unattainable prize of the season, and he has spent 6 years declining to be attained. And now he is sitting damp in my drawing room because a stranger fell asleep on his shoulder in the rain. I find it interesting." Marigold looked at the fire. She tried her sentence aloud. "Lady Aurelia, before I meet Mr. Thornley, before I agree to anything, I should like to set out my conditions." Lady Aurelia stopped. Slowly she turned. Her face did something unexpected. It lit, very briefly, with the expression of a woman who had been served a dish she had not expected to be cooked well. "Conditions. 5 of them. 5. Will you sit, please?" Lady Aurelia sat. "By all means, set them out. The first. Whatever is to be done. The courtship, the appearances, the spectacle. Mr. Thornley and I are to have a clear understanding of each other from the first hour. No deception between us. He is to know exactly what I am, exactly what has been done to me, and exactly what I want from this arrangement, and I am to know the same of him. Reasonable. The second. My daughters are not a piece on this board. Their names are not to be spoken in society. They are not to be used as leverage. If I am to win them back, I will win them back as their mother, not as the heroine of a ballad. And every penny I am given, every gown, every shilling, a strict account is to be kept, and at the end of this affair, half is to be set aside in trust. For Theodosia and Honeysuckle, in case they, too, one day find themselves on a bench in the rain." Lady Aurelia did not speak for a moment. When she did, her voice was different. "That will be done. The third. I will not be made a fool of in private to be a queen in public. Whatever Mr. Thornley and I are seen to be in the world, we are something honest in the rooms where no one watches. I have had 7 years of a husband who was charming in front of guests and a stone everywhere else. Mrs. Vesper, I am not finished. The fourth. If, at any point during this, I come to feel something for him beyond the bargain, or he for me, we are to speak it. Plainly. Without games. And the bargain is to end, in that moment, and become whatever the truth between us is. I will not be made to discover, in some terrible drawing room, that what I have been doing is real. Goodness. And the fifth. When this is over, I am not to be sent quietly home. I have no home. So, at the close of this season, you will use the influence you have so thoroughly displayed to settle me somewhere of my own. A small house, a modest income, a position in some quiet corner of England where my daughters, when they are grown, may come to me without shame. I will not be a guest in your house forever. I will not be passed from kindness to kindness like a parcel. I will earn my way, but I will need a door. The fire shifted in the grate. A coal fell. Lady Aurelia looked at her for a long time. Mrs. Vesper, When your mother was 18, she came to me with a black eye she had got from her own father, and she told me she would not marry the man he had chosen, and that if I did not help her, she would walk into the sea. I helped her. She married your father instead, and she was happy for the 11 years she had. I have wondered, at intervals, these 19 years, whether I should have looked in on her children. I told myself I had no right. I see now that I was a coward. She rose and crossed to Marigold's chair and laid her dry, ringed hand against Marigold's cheek for a single moment, the way a woman touches a daughter. Your 5 conditions are accepted. All of them. Will you receive Mr. Thornley, or shall I send him home to dry out? Send him in, but I should like to receive him alone. My dear, there is no reputation left to lose. Send him in. Lady Aurelia inclined her head. As you wish. I find, in your mother's memory, that I am rather glad you exist. She closed the door behind her. Marigold listened to the slow footstep in the corridor and the soft turn of the handle, and she understood, with a clarity so cold and so steady that it did not feel like fear at all, that the next 5 minutes would decide the rest of her life. The door opened. The man who had given her his umbrella stepped into the room. His coat hung dark at the shoulders, where the rain had found it. He stopped just inside the door, and he looked at her, and he did not speak, and Marigold realized with a small, surprised tilt of the heart that he was waiting, not for her to rise, not for her to curtsy, but for her to decide whether she wished him to come further in. Mr. Thornley, Mrs. Vesper, that is not my name. No, I know. And he closed the door behind him, very gently, and waited. He did not sit until she invited him to. Marigold noticed this. She noticed also that he chose the chair furthest from hers. A man who had measured the distance women allowed him, and who had decided today to leave more of it than was usual. Will you sit, Mr. Thornley? Thank you. He sat. The wing chair was a little small for him. There was a small, thin scar at the corner of his mouth that lifted when he was not speaking, as though some old amusement had decided to live there. You have been told what I am. Lady Aurelia has told me what the world believes you are. I should prefer, if you will permit me, to hear from you what you actually are. Why? Because I do not propose to spend the next 6 weeks in the company of an invention. Marigold looked at him for a long moment. My name is Marigold Vesper Hollyfield. I was, until 10 o'clock this morning, the Duchess of Ravensmore. I have 2 daughters. The elder is 6. Her name is Theodosia. She does not cry easily. The younger is 4. Her name is Honeysuckle. She cries when the wind is wrong. I have not been permitted to see either of them since Tuesday last. I signed a paper this morning that says they are not mine. The paper is in my dress. She drew breath. I am very tired, Mr. Thornley, and I am not entirely sure I am still a person, in the sense you mean. But I will try to be one for the duration of this conversation, if you will do me the same courtesy. He did not look away. He did not pity her, either, which she had been braced for. Thank you. May I tell you, in turn, what I am? Please. My name is Caspian Wren Thornley. My father was a Bristol shipwright who married above himself and was made to feel it for the rest of his life. My mother died when I was 9. I went to sea at 15 and came back at 25 with rather more money than I had any business possessing. I am 34. I am unmarried. I have not been in love that I can recall. I am told I am cold. I am told I am proud. I will not contradict any of that. Why are you doing this, Mr. Thornley? The Duke of Ravensmore ruined my sister. The fire moved. I had one sister. Her name was Lynette. She was clever and reckless. He met her at a country ball when I was abroad. She was 20. He was 30. He told her he loved her. He told her he would marry her. He told her a great many things which he had no intention of meaning, and he did so in writing, on stationery that bore his crest, and Lynette, being 20, and being in love, and having no brother near enough to tell her what such men are, believed him. He paused. He did not raise his voice. It did not need raising. By the time I came home, she was 4 months gone with child, and he had stopped answering her letters. He had married another woman, a baronet's daughter, who died within the year. He laughed at me. He stood in his own hall and laughed, and asked whether I imagined a man of his standing would be made to answer for a country girl's misunderstanding. Lynette died in childbed in February. The infant followed her in a fortnight. I buried them in the same coffin, because that is what she had asked me to promise. Marigold did not move. I have been waiting 9 years for the Duke of Ravensmore to do something stupid enough that the world might be persuaded to look at him properly. He was always too careful. The first wife was sickly and convenient. You, I am sorry to say, were too well-mannered to be turned into a scandal. But this haste, this casting aside, this engagement to a child of 19, this is the first foolish thing he has done in his life. The umbrella was not part of any plan. The umbrella was because you were sitting in a great deal of rain and no one else had stopped. She found she could not speak for a moment. Mr. Thornley, I have set out 5 conditions to Lady Aurelia. I should like to set them out to you. Please. She did. She spoke them clearly, and she watched his face. He did not interrupt. When she came to the 4th, she saw the small scar lift at the corner of his mouth, but he did not smile. When she had finished, he was quiet. I accept all 5. I should like to add a 6th, with your permission. Add it. If, at any moment in the next 6 weeks, you wish this to stop, for any reason or for no reason, you have only to say so. The arrangement ends in that hour. There will be no persuasion. I will not have you trapped twice in one lifetime, Mrs. Hollyfield. Not by him, and not by me. She looked at him across the fire. Mr. Thornley, I should like a cup of tea. I think you should like several. Shall I ring? Please. He rose and crossed to the bell and pulled it, and as he did, Marigold Vesper Hollyfield felt the first small warmth in her chest that was not the fire, and understood, with a very faint and very dangerous tilt of the heart, that she was going to have to be careful with this man in ways she had not anticipated. Lady Aurelia Quennell rose at 6. By 7, a maid named Pernilla had brought a basin of warm water and laid out on the bed a morning gown of deep gray silk that fitted Marigold as though it had been cut for her body. Lady Aurelia had it made on Friday, ma'am. The modiste had your measurements from your brother's letter. Marigold came down at 8 and found Lady Aurelia in a small, severe study at the back of the house, lined floor to ceiling with ledgers. Lady Aurelia did not rise. She gestured to the chair opposite. Sit. We have a great deal to discuss. For some minutes, Lady Aurelia wrote. When she laid down her pen, it was without ceremony. I told Mr. Thornley yesterday that I had not behaved as I expected to behave. I have spent the night considering it. I have decided to be honest with you in a manner which I do not generally extend to women I have known less than a day. Please. My concern in this affair is not, principally, you. Marigold set down her cup. I beg your pardon. You heard me correctly. I am sorry for what has been done to you. I will assist you to the limit of my considerable ability. But you should not mistake my assistance for the thing that has driven me to it. For Lady Sabienne, then. In part. But Sabienne is not the heart of it. The heart of it, Mrs. Vesper, is Mr. Thornley. Marigold did not move. I have known Caspian Thornley for 11 years. I knew his sister before her death. She came to me 3 weeks before she died, on the recommendation of a physician's wife. I sat with her. I held her hand on the third night, when the fever rose. I wrote the letter that informed her brother of her death. He has not, in the 11 years since, asked me whether I was the one who did it. I rather suspect he knows. What you must understand is that the man who came to see you yesterday is not the man who has spent the last 9 years burying himself in shipping firms. He has been, since Lynnett's death, a kind of ghost. A very rich ghost, very clever, but a ghost. He came to the bench because I had chosen the one description of a woman that I knew might make him put down his pen. He has been waiting, I think, without knowing he was waiting, to encounter such a woman in a circumstance in which he could be of use without being asked. You have used me to bait him. I have used you to find him. There is a distinction. Marigold was silent. Lady Aurelia leaned forward, and her voice dropped. I will help you ruin Adrian Hollyfield. I will help you recover your daughters. I will set you up in a house at the end of this affair. But I want you to know that I have taken you in because I see in you the only person in England who might pull Caspian Thornley back into the land of the living. And I am not prepared to die without seeing him there. Lady Aurelia, you set me 5 conditions. I should like to set you one in return. Set it. Do not lie to him. The fire in the grate ticked. Whatever else passes between you in the next 6 weeks, performance, pretense, let there be one room in this house, and one chair, and 1 hour of the day in which you tell that man the truth. About yourself, about your fear, about your daughters. He has spent 9 years being lied to by women who wanted his money or his arm or his name. If you lie to him also, even kindly, even out of pride, you will lose him before he has been found, and I will not forgive you for it. I understand you. You are a woman who has been taught to make herself small. I have seen it across the desk this morning. You sit with your hands folded, as though you are afraid they will cost you something if they unfold. I am asking you to unlearn that in his presence. The world may have you small for the rest of the season. I do not care. But in the chair you sit in when you are alone with him, you will be your true size, or you will leave my house. Marigold, to her astonishment, found that her eyes had filled. I do not know if I remember it. Then I shall hold the measure for you, child, until you do. Now, there is the matter of your daughter's nurse. Mrs. Bramley wrote to me on Sunday. The cup nearly slipped from Marigold's hand. Bramley wrote to you. At my request. She has agreed, at considerable risk to her position, to bring the children to walk in Hyde Park on Thursday morning at 10. The Duke is in Brighton until the weekend. She will pretend not to see you. The Lady Theodosia and the Lady Honeysuckle will be permitted to run on the grass in the manner of children, and any private conversation that may pass between a child and a stranger who happens to bend down to retrieve a fallen glove is a matter Mrs. Bramley has assured me she will not feel obliged to report. Marigold could not speak. She put her face in her hands. There, Lady Aurelia said more quietly. There. I told you I was useful, child. I told you I had not been kind. She rose and laid her hand for a moment on Marigold's shoulder, and then she left the study, leaving Marigold alone with the unbearable knowledge that on Thursday morning, in 2 days, she would see her children again. The walk in Hyde Park happened. It nearly killed her. Theodosia did not come close. Theodosia hung back from Mrs. Bramley's hand and looked at the woman in the dove-gray cloak with the steady, betrayed eyes of a child who had been told that her mother had gone away and who had refused, in some animal part of herself, to believe it, and who was now being asked to believe it twice. She did not run on the grass. Her small mouth set in a line Marigold knew, and Marigold understood kneeling on the gravel path, pretending to fix a glove that was not unfastened, that her daughter was furious with her, and was right to be. Honeysuckle, however, ran. Honeysuckle ran straight at her on plump legs, and threw both arms around her neck and said, "Mama, Mama, Mama, you smell different." And Marigold held her for the 7 seconds she was permitted, before Mrs. Bramley clucked her tongue and called the child back. Caspian Thornley was waiting at the carriage. He had not come into the park. He had agreed, at her quiet request the night before, that this hour was not for any other man to be near. He stood at the carriage door with his hat in his hand, and when he saw her face, he did not ask her how it had been. He opened the door and handed her in, and produced a clean handkerchief, which he laid on the seat between them without comment. She did not weep. She looked out of the window, and after a moment she said, "The elder one would not come near me." No, I had thought she would. She is the bold one. Children are not bold about the things that matter most to them. Bold children are the most careful of all when the stake is high enough. Linnet was the bold one in our family. I was the careful one. When our mother died, Linnet stood by the bed and did not cry. I was 9, and I screamed the house down. It took me a great while to understand that Linnet had simply stood closer to the fire than I had, and had been more afraid of it. Theodosia will come close, Mrs. Hollyfield, when she has decided it is safe. Marigold was quiet for a long time. I should like, Mr. Thornley, for you to call me Marigold when we are alone. I cannot be myself while being addressed as Mrs. Hollyfield by a man who has heard me weep into his shoulder in the rain. The thin scar lifted at the corner of his mouth. Marigold, then, in private. And in private, what shall I call you? Caspian will do. Caspian, then. She found, against her expectation, that she was smiling. Very faintly, only at one corner of her mouth, but smiling. It was the first smile of any size that had been on her face in some weeks. That evening, in Lady Aurelia's library, she found him in the chair by the lamp, with a book open on his knee that he was not reading. He did not rise when she came in. He had been instructed by her that he was not to rise when she entered a room they were sharing in private. It made the room feel like a room she was permitted to be in, rather than a room she had been admitted to. "What are you not reading?" "Locke, Concerning Human Understanding. I bought it 12 years ago and have been not reading it ever since." "And what are you thinking about?" "I am thinking that I don't know what color your eyes are in daylight. The fire keeps changing them." She felt the heat climb her throat. She sat down opposite him and reached for a volume of poems. "Hazel. They go green in summer, my mother used to say." He was quiet for a while. Then, in a different voice, lower, almost careful, he said, "Marigold. May I ask you something which is not my business? The Duke. Did he hurt you?" The book went still in her hands. He did not strike me. He had a horror of the visible. He had a way of speaking that takes pieces off you, very neatly, as a butcher takes a joint. Over years. So that you do not notice until one morning you look at yourself in a glass and there is a great deal of you missing. He could spend 40 minutes describing the precise ways in which I had failed him over the day, in a voice no louder than this one. And when I wept, he would tell me I was hysterical. And when I did not weep, he would tell me I was unfeeling. After Theodosia was born and was a girl, he was distant for a season. After Honeysuckle was born and was also a girl, he stopped speaking to me at meals. After the third, there was a third, Caspian, in the spring of last year. A boy. When I lost the boy in the 7th month, he did not come to my room for 9 days. And on the 10th, he came in and sat at the foot of the bed and told me that the physician was of the opinion that the fault lay with me, and that he was beginning to consider what his obligations to the title might require him to do. He said it without raising his eyes from the carpet. It was Persian, blue and red. I have not been able to look at a Persian carpet since. The library was very quiet. Marigold, look at me. Please. She looked at him. He had set the lock aside. There was a great deal in his face. Anger, contained. Grief, older than today. And something else. Something she did not at first recognize, because no man had directed it at her in 7 years. It was respect. I am going to destroy him, he said quietly. Not for my sister. For you. The shape of the plan does not change. But the reason is changing in this hour. Caspian. Yes. Do not love me. Not yet. I have nothing left to give a man who loves me. Wait. Wait until I have my daughters. Wait until I have my own door. Wait until I am a person again. He looked at her for a long moment. I will wait as long as you need. She put her face in her hands. She did not weep. She laughed once, very softly, into her palms, and the sound surprised her so much that she lifted her face to look at it, as though laughter were a physical thing that had escaped her. I had forgotten that I could do that. Yes, Caspian said. I rather thought you had. And he picked up the lock again and went on, not reading it. And somewhere, in some room of her, a small thing that had been frozen for a very long time began, against its better judgment, to thaw. The Vauncey supper was not the largest event of the season, which was why Lady Aurelia had selected it. Lady Vauncey was a widow of 60 who detested the Duke of Ravensmore on grounds she had never explained, and who could be relied upon to ensure that a stranger's name was on the lips of 3 useful people before the soup was cleared. 60 guests, 2 duchesses, a foreign minister, and, Lady Aurelia had withheld this until Sunday, the Duke of Ravensmore and Lady Sabian Marchcourt, attending together in their first public appearance since the engagement had been quietly circulated. He will not approach you, Lady Aurelia said in the carriage. He will look. He will be told who you are. He will receive a number of small social wounds, which he will not be able to acknowledge. We will not give him the satisfaction of a scene. Mr. Thornley, you will not look at him at all. Looking would be a kindness. You owe him no kindness. You will look at her, instead, with the courtesy you would extend to any young woman of 19 in a dress that does not suit her. It is clear. Marigold, your hands. Marigold looked down. They were not still. You will sit on them through the soup if you must. Breathe. She breathed. She had been dressed in a gown of dark plum silk that had no ornament whatsoever, and Lady Aurelia had pronounced exactly insufficient. Around her throat was a single thin chain of gold, on which hung a small oval of jet, Lady Aurelia's own. The gown said, "Widow." The chain said, "No one has bought me anything." They saw the Duke within the first quarter of an hour. He was at the far end of the long room, by the fire, with his hand on Lady Sabian Marchcourt's elbow, in the precise way Marigold remembered him touching her own 7 years ago, when he had wished a portrait painter to capture a particular angle of her chin. Sabian was a small, fair girl, with a great quantity of pale ringlets, and the slightly pinched mouth of someone who had been corseted to a measurement she could not breathe at. She was looking at the fire. She was not looking at the Duke. Marigold registered the small, unconscious turning away, and felt a sharp, clean, almost maternal stab of recognition. Oh, child, she thought. Oh, you poor child. You do not know yet. Mrs. Vesper, Lady Vauncey said, materializing at her elbow. I do not believe you have met the Comte de Lermont. The Comte was perhaps 45, with a clever face and a French ribbon in his coat. He bowed over Marigold's hand. He told her he hoped she would like London, and that Lady Aurelia had said she was a great reader. Marigold heard herself ask the Comte what he was reading, and heard him answer that he was reading the new Sir Walter Scott, and was disappointed in it. And she heard herself say, quite easily, that she had not yet read it, but would now make a point of doing so in order to share his disappointment. The Comte laughed. It carried. She felt across the room the Duke of Ravensmore look up. She did not look at him, but she felt the look land on the side of her cheek like the heat of an opened oven, and for the space of perhaps 4 seconds, she could not remember whether she was breathing in or out. And then Caspian, very quietly, at her side, said, "There is a copy in Lady Aurelia's library, I believe. I shall lend it to you tomorrow." And the small, ordinary cadence of the sentence steadied her. Lady Sabienne approached during the second half of the supper. It was so unexpected that Marigold, who had been speaking to the foreign minister's wife, did not at first realize the small, fair person at her shoulder was waiting. Lady Sabienne curtsied, as a girl curtsies, who has been drilled in it. Her gloved hands were not still. "Mrs. Vesper, forgive me. We have not been introduced. Lady Aurelia is my godmother, and she has spoken of you. And I wish to make your acquaintance." She had not been sent. Marigold could see, in the white edge of the girl's mouth, that she had not been sent. She had come herself, across 40 feet of crowded room, on the evening of her first public appearance with her betrothed. Marigold felt Caspian, at her side, go absolutely still in the careful way of the bench in the rain. "Lady Sabienne, how kind. Will you sit?" The girl perched. Her eyes were gray and very wide and very young. "Mrs. Vesper, I have done a thing tonight which my father and his grace will be very displeased about. I told my chaperone I was going to the card room. I have perhaps 2 minutes. Lady Sabienne, please." The girl's gloved hand came out and took Marigold's. "I do not need to know what you are. I have been told a great many things in the last 6 weeks, and I have begun to suspect that not all of them are true. And I am to be married at Michaelmas, and I have no mother, and I have nobody who will tell me the things I should be afraid of." Marigold's hand closed over Sabienne's and held. "I understand. Listen to me, child. Lady Aurelia is your godmother, and you may go to her at any hour of any day for any reason, and you will be safer in her drawing room than in any other room in London. Yes. Tell her Marigold sent you. Will you remember that?" "I will remember." "And Sabienne, if between this evening and Michaelmas there is 1 hour, just one, when his voice goes very soft and very precise, and you find that your hands are shaking and you do not know why, that is the hour you go to Lady Aurelia. Do not wait for a second one." "I hear you." The girl stood. She made a small, dignified curtsy and walked away. Marigold watched her go and did not breathe again until she had been intercepted by a chaperone and led back to the Duke's side. The Duke's face, when his betrothed returned to him, was perfectly composed, but Marigold, who had spent 7 years learning to read it, saw the white at the edge of his nostril and saw the slow turn of his head as his eyes moved across the room and located her, fully and deliberately, for the first time in the evening. It was the look of a man who had just understood that he had miscalculated, and who was beginning, for the first time in his life perhaps, to be afraid of a woman. She did not look back. She turned to the foreign minister's wife and resumed the conversation, and across the table Caspian Wren Thornley picked up his glass and lifted it 1/2 an inch in her direction, where no one but she could see it. She permitted herself, for the space of 1 heartbeat, to meet his eyes across the candles. Then she looked away. The note arrived on Wednesday. Marigold, who had been writing her 6th attempted letter to Theodosia, took it without recognizing the hand and broke the seal. It was from Mrs. Bramley. "Madam, the master has come back from Brighton not in temper. He has dismissed the under-nurse without notice and questioned Lady Theodosia for the better part of an hour as to who she has spoken to in the last 2 weeks. The child gave a good account of herself, but I do not know how long she will hold. I cannot bring them to the park again. If there is to be a meeting, It must be this Friday at the latest. And after that, I must go silent. The Lady Honeysuckle has been asking for you in her sleep. Burn this. B. Marigold burnt it. Then she walked down the passage and knocked on Lady Aurelia's study. Friday. It must be Friday. He is questioning Theodosia. Friday, then. There is a private chapel at Mr. Thornley's house in Berkeley Square. It has its own door from the mews. Bramley can bring the children at 3 under the pretext of a visit to a milliner. They will not be missed for 40 minutes. You will have those 40 minutes, child, and not a moment more. Caspian came at 7, as he had been coming every evening for a fortnight. Marigold told him in the library. He listened. The chapel will be ready. There is a side room with a fire. I shall not be in the house. You will not want me there. I shall walk in the park. I shall return at 4 exactly. That will do. Sit down, please. She sat. He did not. He stood by the fire, and when he spoke, his voice was careful in a way she had not heard from him before. Marigold, there is a thing I should like to say. You asked me 10 days ago not to love you yet, and I gave you my word. I am not breaking it now, but I should like, before Friday, to say one sentence aloud. May I? Yes. If, at any point in your life, not now, not in 6 weeks, not in a year, but at any point, when your daughters are returned to you and you have your own door, you should turn round and find that you would like to be loved by me. You have only to turn round. I shall be where you left me. She did not speak for a long time. Caspian, I am going to say a sentence of my own, and you are not to answer it. I have already turned round. He did not move. I turned round the night I told you about the carpet. I did not tell you, because I had asked you to wait. So I will not say any more. Not yet. But I am turned round, Caspian. You are not waiting in the dark. You are waiting in a lit room. He closed his eyes. Thank you, Marigold. Friday came. The chapel at Berkeley Square was small and clean, and smelled faintly of beeswax, and someone, Caspian, she suspected, had laid a fire in the side room, and had set a low table near it, with a plate of small cakes that Marigold recognized as the kind Honeysuckle preferred. There were 3 child-sized chairs that had not been there yesterday. He had bought them. He had bought 3 small chairs for 40 minutes. Bramley brought them at 1 minute past 3. She came in by the mews door with both children in tow, and when she saw Marigold, she said only, "Madam," in a voice that was cracked clean through, and went and sat in the chapel proper to keep watch. Honeysuckle came first. Theodosia did not come at all. Theodosia stood in the doorway of the side room and looked at her mother. Marigold did not move, and did not hold out her arms. She knelt down on the rug, slowly. Theo, I am here. I am not going to come close. You may come close or you may not. Whatever you decide is the right thing. I shall be here for 38 more minutes, whether you come close or not. Theodosia's mouth set in the line. You went away. Yes. Papa said you were sick. Papa was wrong, Theo. Papa said you did not want us anymore. Papa was wrong, Theo. I want you. I have always wanted you. I am going to come and get you. I do not yet know how, and I do not yet know when, but I will come and get you, and I will come and get Honeysuckle, and we will live somewhere that is not Papa's house, and you may climb anything you wish. Do you hear me, Theodosia? I hear you. Will you come close? The small mouth wavered. Not yet. All right, Theo. There are cakes on the table. They are the kind Honey likes. There is a chair for you, if you should like it. I shall not look at you. I shall look at the fire. Marigold sat down on the rug, with her back to the room, and she looked into the fire, and she heard, behind her, the small, careful step of a 6-year-old crossing a room she had decided not to flee, and she heard the small thump of a child sitting down in a chair that was the right size, and she heard Honeysuckle, 2 chairs over, say, "Mama, the cakes are yellow," in a voice of total astonishment, and Marigold did not turn. She did not turn for 3 minutes. When she did, Theodosia was sitting in the smallest chair, eating a yellow cake with perfect 6-year-old gravity, and Theodosia said, with her mouth full, in a voice so small, Marigold almost missed it, "Hello, Mama." It was the only thing she said in the 35 minutes that followed. It was enough. At 3:40, Bramley appeared in the doorway and said, "Madam, we must." And Marigold rose and watched her 2 daughters be led out of the chapel by the hand of the woman who had nursed her also, 25 years ago, in another life. She heard presently the front door of the house and an unhurried step in the hall, and then in the doorway behind her. She did not turn round. "It is 4 o'clock, Marigold," Caspian said quietly. "I am back." "Yes." "Will you come round?" "In a moment, Caspian." When she turned, her face was wet, but her hands were still. She crossed the room to him. "Theodosia spoke to me. She said hello, Mama. She said it with her mouth full. I'm very glad, Marigold." "Caspian, I should like, please, if it is permitted, to be held for a little while. Only held. I find that I cannot stand entirely upright at the present moment, and I do not wish to ask Lady Aurelia, and there is no one else Please, Caspian." He did not answer. He simply opened his arms, and she walked into them, and his arms closed round her, and she put her face into the wool at the front of his coat, and she stood there and was held for longer than she had been held in any year of the 7 that had gone. And presently she felt him bend his head, and felt the press of his mouth, very lightly, against the crown of her hair. Not a kiss exactly, but a small unspoken thing he had been holding carefully, and had let himself, for 1 second only, set down. The letter from Crispin came on the following Tuesday. He had been called on by a gentleman of the Duke of Ravensmoor's acquaintance, who had asked Crispin a number of questions, and had left a card, and had said, "Pray be so good as to convey to your sister that his Grace would be obliged by an interview on Thursday at 3. The address on the card was Ravensmoor House. Marigold read the letter twice. Then she crossed the passage and laid it on Lady Aurelia's desk. "He is summoning you." "Yes. He has chosen the hour. He chose 3. Bramley brought the children at 3 on Friday last. He is telling me, in a language only he and I will understand, that he knows about the chapel." "You are sure? He does not pick hours by accident. He never has. You will not go. I will go. If I do not appear on Thursday, Bramley will be dismissed by Friday, and the children will be put under a different woman, and I will not see them again until Theodosia is of age. Mr. Thornley is not to be told until I am inside the house." Lady Aurelia looked at her for a long moment. Her face, the dry face that had not, in all their fortnight together, given anything away, broke briefly. "Very well. But you will go in my carriage, and my coachman will wait at the door, and you will be back by 3:30, or my coachman will go in after you. And you will write a letter to Mr. Thornley, to be opened only if you do not return." "I will write it." She wrote the letter. It took her 2 hours. She gave it to Pernilla with instructions, and tried to eat luncheon, and could not. Thursday at 3 she walked up the steps of Ravensmoor House. The footman who admitted her did not meet her eyes. He had been her footman. She had hired him. He showed her into the small library off the hall. Not the great library where guests were received, but the small one, where the Duke conducted estate business and kept the punishment small enough not to leave marks. And he closed the door behind her, and the click of the latch was a sound she had spent 7 years learning the meaning of. The Duke was at the writing table. He did not rise. "Marigold, sit down." "I prefer to stand, Your Grace." "Sit down." She sat. She found that her hands were perfectly still. You have been seen at the Vauncey supper. You have been seen on the arm of a man named Thornley, who is, I understand, a person of trade. You have been seen on Friday last, entering a chapel in Berkeley Square at 3 in the afternoon. The chapel belongs to the man Thornley. My nurse took my children to that chapel and was there with them for 39 minutes. Have you anything to say? I have nothing to say to any of this, Your Grace. You are not denying it. I am not denying it. I see. He picked up his pen. He turned it once between his fingers. It had used to mean that he was choosing the precise sentence with which to take the next piece off her. Mrs. Bramley will leave this house tomorrow morning at 8. She will not be given a character. Lady Theodosia and Lady Honeysuckle will be removed, on Saturday, to the country house at Ravensmoor, where they will remain for the foreseeable future under the supervision of my late mother's cousin, Mrs. Coyne. She is 63 years old. She does not receive correspondence from persons not approved by me. Do you understand, Marigold? She understood. He had taken Theodosia and Honeysuckle out of the world, and he had done it on a Thursday because she had been at his house on a Friday, and he intended for it to last 12 years. I understand, Your Grace. There is, of course, a way in which Mrs. Coyne might prove unnecessary. You will withdraw from London. You will not be seen at any further public event. You will not see the man Thornley again. You will not write to him. You will not write to my children. You will not write to my nurse. You will not, in particular, communicate further with Lady Sabienne Marchcourt, who has been considerably distressed by some advice she received at the Vauncey supper, and who has begun to ask questions of her father, which her father cannot answer. Do we understand one another? She rose. She rose without permission. She had not done that in his presence in 7 years. Your Grace. Sit down, Marigold. Your Grace, I am leaving this house in 2 minutes, and before I leave, I am going to say 4 sentences to you, and you are going to listen to them. The first. I do not believe you will send Theodosia and Honeysuckle to Mrs. Coyne. Theodosia is 6 years old, and is already a person who tells stories to her sister at night about a mother who is going to come and get them, and Mrs. Coyne, however rigid her principle, will not be able to stop her. Within a year, she will write to you that she is unable to manage your daughter, and you will discover, as I discovered, Your Grace, over 7 years, that there are some women you cannot make small by force, and Theodosia is already, at 6, more of one of them than I ever was at 26. The second. Mrs. Bramley will not be dismissed in disgrace because Lady Aurelia Quennell has been in correspondence with the Duchess of Westcliff, who happens to be her first cousin, and who has expressed an interest in employing Mrs. Bramley directly, at a higher salary than you presently pay her. The Duchess of Westcliff will laugh. The third. I will not withdraw from London. I am going to be at the Petherfield ball next Tuesday, and at every event Lady Aurelia chooses to take me to between now and Michaelmas, on the arm of Mr. Thornley, who is a person of trade, Your Grace, and who is also the man to whom 3 of your principal creditors have, in the past fortnight, sold the entirety of your debts. The drawing rooms of London are presently talking about how a duke who cannot pay his bills has chosen to put aside a wife who bore him 2 healthy children for a girl of 19, who has, since the Vauncey supper, written twice to her godmother asking to be released from her engagement. And the fourth, Your Grace, is this. You may keep my daughters from me for a season, or for a year, or for several years. The law is on your side. But I am 30 years old, and I am in extremely good health, and I will be alive on the day Theodosia turns 18, and on that day, your eldest daughter is going to walk out of your house on her own legs, and she is going to come and find me, and the second thing she does on her 18th birthday is going to be to take her sister by the hand and walk out also. I know this because I am her mother. You may take 12 years, Your Grace. I have them. Do you? She did not wait for an answer. She walked to the door. She opened it. She did not look back. In the hall, the footman who would not meet her eyes brought her cloak, and as he laid it across her shoulders, she felt his hand briefly press, once, against her back, the smallest of pressures, a thing that could be denied. And she understood that there were people in this house who had been waiting also for 7 years, and that not all of them were children. When the carriage drew up at Bryanston Square, she looked out and saw who was standing on the steps, and understood that Pernilla had given Caspian Thornley the letter the moment she left. He stood in the rain. It had begun raining again, sometime in the last hour. Without a hat, and without an umbrella, she walked up the steps to him, and he said, "Marigold," in a voice that wasn't his voice. And she said, "I am here, Caspian. I am back." And he took her face between his two hands, and looked at her as though he were checking for damage, and finding none. And then she put her arms round him in the rain, on the steps, in full view of Bryanston Square, and she put her face into his throat, and she did not weep. She had finished weeping, she found, on a bench in the rain a fortnight ago. She had work to do now, and a man on her doorstep who had been waiting on his sister's behalf, and on his own, and now, finally, on hers. And she had a daughter who would walk out of a house in 12 years and find her, and she discovered, in his arms in the rain, entirely her own woman again. The flight, when it came, was not Marigold's. It was Lady Sabienne Marchcourt's. She arrived at Bryanston Square at 11:30 on Friday night, in a hired hack, with no bonnet, no maid, and a small carpet bag containing one nightgown and a copy of Sense and Sensibility. Pernilla showed the girl into the drawing room and went to wake her mistress. Lady Aurelia came down in a dressing gown of grey velvet, with her hair in a single plait, and looked at her godchild for 10 seconds without speaking, and then turned to Pernilla and said only, "Tea, the good brandy, and wake Mrs. Vesper." Marigold came down in her wrapper, and found Sabienne sitting on the settee, with her face the color of paper. "Mrs. Vesper, it was tonight. The hour you told me. The very soft voice. He came to my father's house. I heard my own name. I heard yours. I went to the head of the stairs. He saw me. He came up. He said in the voice, that if I did not, if I refused to, 'Hush, child. Say bien. Do you wish to break the engagement?' 'Yes.' 'You are quite certain?' 'Godmother, if you put me into a carriage tonight and send me back to my father's house, I shall walk into the river before morning. I have nowhere else.' 'You will not go into a carriage. You will not go into a river. You will sleep in the green bedroom upstairs, which has a key on the inside and a sound bolt. Marigold, sit with her until she sleeps.' Marigold took her up. She sat on the edge of the bed in the green bedroom, and Sabienne lay on her side with her eyes open for a long time, and presently she said, very small, into the dark, 'Mrs. Vesper, did he do to you the things I am afraid of?' 'I do not know, child, what you are afraid of.' 'I do not know either, Mrs. Vesper. That is the worst part.' 'Then sleep, Sabienne. We shall find out together what you are afraid of in the morning. You do not have to know what it is in order not to want it. Sleep.' Sabienne slept. At 1 in the morning, Marigold went down to the library, where a lamp was still burning, and found Lady Aurelia at the desk, writing with great speed. 'She is asleep.' 'Good. Sit down.' 'I am writing to Ravensmore, the first letter of truth I have written to him in his life. It is a great relief.' Marigold sat down. 'Aurelia, I love him. I do not know what to do with it. I told him 10 days ago that I had turned round, and I had thought I would not turn further until my children were back. But I went to that house yesterday at 3, and I sat across from the man I had been afraid of for 7 years, and I was not afraid of him. And the reason was because there was a man on a doorstep who would be there when I came back. I have just discovered this fortnight that I have been waiting all my life, and I don't have any waiting left in me. Lady Aurelia laid down her pen. Then do not wait, child. I have lived 71 years. There is no right hour. There is only this hour and the next. You have spent 7 years being a woman to whom things were done. You may, if you wish, spend the remainder of your life being the woman who does them. Begin tonight. Send for him. It is 2 a.m. He is awake. He has not slept since Pernilla brought him your letter on Thursday. He will be in this house 20 minutes after you send for him, and I shall make myself extremely scarce, and Pernilla shall be deaf, and the world may keep its opinions to itself until Michaelmas. Send for him, child. Marigold sent for him. He came in 19 minutes. She heard the door and the brief murmur of Pernilla and his step in the hall, and she stood up, and the door opened, and Caspian stopped in the doorway. Marigold. Caspian, come in. Close the door. He closed it. Caspian. I do not propose to make a speech. I made one yesterday to him, and it cost me something I do not yet know the size of. I am going to say one sentence, and then I should like, if it is permitted, to be kissed. By you. I should like it not to be only on the top of my head. Marigold. I have come round to look at you, and I am not going to look away, and I do not wish to wait for Michaelmas, and I do not wish to wait for my children, and I do not wish to wait for a small house in Sussex with my own door. I should like, please, for you to come and stand here, and put down the hat you are still holding, and kiss me. He came and stood there. He put down the hat. He took her face in his 2 hands, the way he had on the steps in the rain, but slower this time, with a kind of attention she had not known a man could direct at her. And then he said, quite softly, I have been waiting 9 years to be permitted to do this. And he kissed her. It was not a kiss that contained 9 years. It contained perhaps an hour or 2, careful, slow, almost shy at the beginning, learning at the middle, no longer learning at the end. And when she drew back, his hands were still on her face, and her own hands had come up to grip the front of his coat. And she thought, quite clearly, I have not waited for any of this. I have come and got it. Caspian. Yes. On Tuesday at the Petherfield ball. I should like you to ask my brother for me. Crispin. He is not much as a brother, but he is what I have, and I should like the form to be observed in front of the people who will be watching. I will ask him, and I should like the wedding, when it happens, to be small. Aurelia's chapel, Theodosia and Honeysuckle, when I have got them back. No one else I do not know. Yes, and I should like you to know, Caspian, that I am not coming to you for shelter. I have shelter now. Aurelia is my shelter. The house in Sussex is my shelter. My daughters, when I have them, will be my shelter. I am coming to you because I want to. Because I am 30 years old, and I have just discovered what wanting is, and I want you. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Sit down by the fire. I'm going to ring for tea, and we are going to talk until the morning. She rang for tea. The Petherfield ball happened on the Tuesday, as planned, and a great many things happened at it, and most of them were small. The Duke of Ravensmore did not attend. He had been, by the Morning Post, formally released by Lord Marchcourt from his engagement to Lady Sabienne, a release Lord Marchcourt had granted on Sunday afternoon, after a 40-minute interview in which Lady Aurelia Quennell had laid before him the names of the 3 creditors who had sold his future son-in-law's notes to a Bristol shipwright's son, and a small list of sums Lord Marchcourt had been promised in connection with the marriage, which did not quite tally with sums any honest man ought to have been promised. Lord Marchcourt, who was a coward but not a fool, had broken the engagement before tea. The Duke had received the news at 5:30. He had broken a decanter. He had been informed, by his own solicitor at 6, that to appear at the ball would be unwise. He had, by 8, gone out of London for what his secretary described as a season of country retirement. He had, on the morning of his retirement, instructed his man of business to release the children to Mrs. Bramley's care for the duration of his absence, which everyone understood to mean he had not the stomach, this week, for a fight on a second front. Theodosia and Honeysuckle had been at Bryanston Square since Monday afternoon. They were not at the ball. They were upstairs in the green bedroom, in nightgowns, being read to by Lady Sabienne, who had discovered, in 5 days of residence, that she was a great deal more comfortable with children than with adults. Marigold went down the stairs of the Petherfields' house at 9:45 on Caspian Thornley's arm. She wore a gown of deep green silk that was not mourning, and on the third finger of her left hand, she wore, for the first time in public, a thin gold band with a single small emerald, which Caspian had given her on Sunday morning in the library at Bryanston Square. They had agreed that it would be noticed. It was. It was noticed within 4 minutes by Lady Vauncey, who came across the room at her traveling pace, and who said, in a voice intended to be heard by the 7 nearest groups, "Mrs. Vesper, my dear, what a charming ring." "It is a very recent acquisition, Lady Vauncey." "Indeed. Will you take a turn with me round the room? There are several persons I should very much like you to meet." Marigold took the turn. By the second of them, she had understood that Lady Vauncey was conducting, in person, a public exhibition. That the woman on her arm was not to be merely tolerated by London, but was to be known by London, before midnight, as a woman with whom Lady Vauncey was on terms of personal friendship. It was at 11:30, in a small parlor off the supper room, that Caspian asked Crispin Hollyfield for his sister. Crispin had been told, that afternoon, what was coming. He had spent most of the day in a state of mild shock, partly because no one had, in the whole of his life, formally asked him for anything. He said, in a voice that surprised him, "Mr. Thornley, my sister is the only person in my life I have not failed. I should like to fail her in this also, by leaving the matter entirely to her. If she has already said yes, then yes. But I should like to thank you, sir, for asking me, because no one has ever asked me anything before, and it is not nothing." Caspian had shaken his hand, and had said, "It is not nothing, Mr. Hollyfield," and had meant it. The announcement was made at midnight by Lady Aurelia herself in the center of the ballroom, with the orchestra silent. She said, "Friends, I am old, and I do not, as a rule, make speeches at other people's balls. I shall make one tonight. Some of you will have heard a great deal of nonsense about a Mrs. Vesper of my acquaintance. The part that is true, I shall now state plainly. Mrs. Vesper, who has been my guest at Bryanston Square these many weeks, is in fact Mrs. Marigold Hollyfield, formerly the Duchess of Ravensmore. She was set aside by her husband in August. She is a free woman in law. She is a freer woman, in fact. She is engaged, as of Sunday morning last, to Mr. Caspian Wren Thornley, who is, as some of you will know, a person of trade, and who has done more good in this country in the last 9 years with his trade than most of the persons in this room have done with their inheritances. The wedding will be small, and at Michaelmas, and most of you will not be invited, and you are not to take it personally. Lady Theodosia and Lady Honeysuckle Hollyfield are upstairs, in the safekeeping of my goddaughter, and they will be at the wedding, because they are loved. I have no further announcement. Pray dance." There was, for perhaps 4 seconds, no sound at all. Then someone, quite far back in the room, it was afterwards decided to have been the Comte de Lermont, began to clap. He clapped alone for 2 seconds. Then Lady Vauncey, at traveling pace, joined him. Then the Peatherfields, because it was their ballroom, and they had read the wind. Then a thin, slow ripple of clapping that was enough of the room, the right enough of the room, that a stranger walking in at that moment would have understood, without being told, that a thing had been settled. Marigold did not weep. She had finished weeping. She stood at the side of the ballroom with Caspian's hand at the small of her back, and she watched it happen, and she thought, "The Duke is alone tonight in a hired house in Brighton. He will hear of it for the rest of his life, in small drawing rooms, in clubs, in letters from men he had thought were his friends. That is enough." She danced that night, twice with Caspian, once with Crispin, once with the Comte, and once with a small, fierce Theodosia, who had been brought down by Sabienne at midquarter midnight in her nightgown and dressing gown, and who had insisted, with her father's stubbornness, that she be permitted to stand upon her mother's feet for the length of one waltz. Honeysuckle slept through the entire ball. A house in Sussex, 3 years on. It is the 2nd week of September, and the elms at the end of the long lawn have begun to turn. And Marigold Vesper Thornley, who has been Mrs. Thornley for 2 years and 10 months, and who has not, in all that time, managed to break the habit of being slightly surprised by the name when she signs it, is sitting on a stone bench at the edge of the kitchen garden, watching her daughters in the long grass at the bottom of the orchard. Theodosia is 9. Theodosia has, over the past 3 years, decided several things about the world, and one of them is that her stepfather is to be addressed as Caspian rather than Papa, because Theodosia has only one Papa, and that is a separate matter and not to be discussed. Theodosia is, at this moment, attempting to teach her sister Honeysuckle, who is 7, how to whistle through a blade of grass. Honeysuckle, who has never been able to whistle, is making a noise like a small angry duck and laughing at it. There is also a baby. He's 14 months old. His name is Linnet Wren Thornley. Caspian had chosen the name on the morning of his birth, in a voice that did not entirely belong to him, and Marigold had said only, "Yes, Caspian, yes," and he is asleep on a rug at Marigold's feet. Caspian comes round the corner of the kitchen garden with a sheaf of papers under one arm and an envelope in the other, and stops, when he sees them, in the way he has always stopped, for 3 years now, when he comes upon Marigold without warning, as though he is checking that the scene is still there. Marigold. Caspian. There is a letter from Sabienne. She and Walter will arrive on the Friday train, and they would like to bring the dog this time, if we are willing. The dog is welcome. He sits beside her on the stone bench and rests his hand, lightly, on the bench between them. And after a moment, Marigold lays her own hand over his without looking, in the way of 2 people who have been doing this for so long that it does not require a glance. There is also a second letter. It came this morning, in the second post, from Crispin. It is not from him. It is from a solicitor in Lincoln's Inn. It concerns the estate of the Duke of Ravensmore, who died on the 11th of last month at the house in Brighton, of an apoplexy, and whose will has been read this Tuesday. Marigold does not move. She does not feel, at first, anything in particular. She feels the September sun on the back of her hand, and the warmth of Caspian's hand under hers, and the small shift of Linnet's breathing on the rug at her feet, and at the bottom of the orchard, Honeysuckle's duck noise rising into outright laughter. He has been dead a month. Yes, the notice was in the Times. We did not see the Times because we were in Cornwall. Tell me. He has left the title and the entailed lands to a cousin he had not seen in 20 years, as everyone knew he would. He has left certain unentailed properties, the house in town, the lodge at Taro Beck, and one or two lesser things to Theodosia. To Theodosia alone. He has left Honeysuckle nothing. The solicitor wishes to know whether Theodosia is to be informed in person, and at what age, and on what terms. Marigold is quiet for a very long time. She looks at the bottom of the orchard. Theodosia has given up on the whistle, and is now lying flat on her back in the grass with her arms behind her head, looking up at the moving clouds, and Honeysuckle is curled against her sister's side, with one hand fastened in Theodosia's pinafore. The way Honeysuckle has been curling against Theodosia's side since she was 2, and Theodosia was 4, and the Duke was still, in a sense, in the world. He left Honeysuckle nothing because he never forgave her for being the second girl. That was my reading also. He left Theodosia those properties because she was the elder, and because he believed, even at the end, that something of his line ought to come down through her. Even though he had cast us all off, it was the only sentimental act of his life. Yes. I'm going to write to the solicitor. I'm going to tell him Theodosia will be informed of her inheritance on her 18th birthday in the form of a single sealed letter from her father, which I shall ask the solicitor to draft, and which I shall on no account read myself. Theodosia will read it on her 18th birthday, in this house, in my presence, and in yours, and she will then decide, at 18, as a grown woman, what she wishes to do with the properties. Sell them, keep them, give them to Honeysuckle, and give them to a cat. It is to be her decision and no one else's. That is the right thing, is Marigold. And I am going to write to Bramley. Bramley nursed him as a boy. Bramley has the right to know that he is dead before she reads it in a newspaper. Yes. And I am going to do nothing else. I am not going to put on mourning. I am not going to travel up to town. I have a lawn full of children and a dog arriving on Friday, and a husband, and I have spent quite enough of my life on the Duke of Ravensmore. That is also the right thing. Good. Today is for the lawn. She closes her eyes against the September sun, and she thinks of a bench, and of a young woman in a gray traveling cloak who sat on it 3 years ago in the rain because she had been told to wait, and who had not, at that moment, believed there would be a day on which a man would come round the corner of a kitchen garden in Sussex with a letter in one hand and a sheaf of papers in the other, and would sit down beside her and would let her decide. Caspian, do you remember what you said? On the bench. I said you were sitting in a quite extraordinary amount of rain. After that, I said, a friend of the family she is about to enter. She does not know it yet. It was forward of me. It was. I have been meaning to say so for 3 years. He smiles. The thin scar lifts for a moment at the corner of his mouth. I have one more thing for you. You remember the umbrella, the one I left propped on the seat beside you, because I could not think how else to leave you, and because I had not the courage to insist. I remember it. It is in the hall closet at Berkeley Square. You have never let anyone use it. No. I had Pernilla send it down with the September boxes. It is in the porch. I thought, perhaps when the rain comes back, you might use it. Today. With me. There is a path round the lower meadow. I thought we might walk. She opens her eyes. Yes, Caspian. We shall walk. They walk. The umbrella is old now, and slightly bent at one rib, and it does not quite close properly anymore. But they put it up between them anyway, when the first drops come, halfway round the lower meadow, and they walk under it slowly, and Marigold tucks her hand through Caspian's arm in the way she has tucked it through his arm 1,000 times in 3 years. And behind them, faintly, from the orchard, comes the sound of 2 children laughing about a duck. If you have stayed with me to the end of this story, I am grateful for the hour you have given to a woman on a bench, and to the man who stopped, and to the daughter who said hello, Mama with her mouth full. Stories like this exist because there are still people in the world who believe a discarded woman is not a finished woman, and that the small acts, an umbrella, a shawl that smells of cedar, a chair that is the right size, are the ones that do the work the loud acts cannot. If you would like more stories of women who find what they are made of, I would be honored if you would stay. Until then, go gently, and do not sit longer in the rain than you need to. Someone is on their way.